Welcome to Google's Iowa Caucus election coverage, and Pema Levy, I want to welcome you specifically to this hangout. You are currently a news writer at Talking Points Memo,
Yep.
And previously you've been an assistant editor at the American Prospect.
Yes.
All right, so tell us a little bit about what you're expecting to see in Iowa, if you can try to put on your prediction hat, look into your crystal ball, if you will. What are you forecasting in terms of who's going to come out of Iowa leading in the Republican field?
That's a good question. Right now we've basically narrowed it down to two people. Right now Mitt Romney is actually polling ahead in a lot of polls, which, you know, even a week ago no one predicted that would happen. But it's actually, I would say his odds of actually pulling off an Iowa win are actually pretty good. You know, Ron Paul has sort of been talked about as the dark horse that could upset this and take Iowa. And then lastly, you know, Rick Santorum is all over the news the last few days. He's been running a really intense, you know, retail traditional campaign on the ground, and has gotten sort of last-minute support in terms of ads and, you know, ad buys from a few small super PACs. So he could, I mean, it's been so intensely fluid that he could throw a wrench into it. I don't see him winning, maybe second. But there you go. I'd say most likely Romney, then I'd give it to Paul, and then I'd give it to Santorum.
And you didn't mention Newt Gingrich in there, even though at times he's been leading in the polls. Does this make a difference to his campaign if he doesn't win in Iowa?
It makes a huge difference. Shocking, I want to say. A few weeks ago, he was leading by a lot and seemed a shoo-in in Iowa. And now he's actually in 5th place. I believe the latest poll actually has him behind Rick Perry, and only ahead of Michelle Bachmann. So, you know, again, it's been so intensely fluid that, you know, a few weeks ago he was the presumed winner in Iowa, and now he's close to last. And no one is predicting that he's going to win at this point. And it certainly is a big hit to his campaign already. So, you know, earlier this month he said, or last month he said he was going to be the nominee. Odds of that now are pretty slim.
All right. Well, speaking of Newt Gingrich, it's no surprise that it's no secret, I should say, that he's had a number of failed marriages. And you recently wrote in Talking Points Memo about this new ad from Rick Perry touting his 30-year marriage to his wife. Do you see that as a direct attack on Newt Gingrich in particular? Are critics maybe reading too much into this?
I think it is. So basically, Iowa, as we know, has a lot of evangelical voters, family values. That's a big thing there. And so a few weeks ago, when Newt Gingrich was winning in Iowa, all of his opponents actually were attacking him on this front, and they weren't attacking him outright. They weren't, you know, pointing fingers and saying, "Hey, you've had 3 marriages." But the way they did this is that they subtly all released ads showing their marriages. So Mitt Romney also had an ad saying he had been married for 42 years. Rick Perry recently came out with his ad, you know, featuring Anita Perry. And so they were sort of like, "Hey, look, we're great family values kind of guys." And then sort of like a hint, Newt Gingrich isn't. So it was definitely sort of a subliminal messaging operation in that way. But both Mitt Romney and Perry went after Newt in that way. Yeah. Well, we all picked up on it right away. Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit more about Rick Perry, and in particular this ad dubbed "Strong." He's received a lot of criticism and condemnation. It's been widely viewed on YouTube, incidentally. But do you think it will affect the GOP primary voters at all? Will it play any sort of a role in terms of their decision making?
You know, Rick Perry, it's actually interesting. Rick Perry has actually put, things again are changing really quickly in the days leading up to the caucuses, but as of a few days ago, he had actually put more money than any other candidate into ads in Iowa. I saw some numbers at about $6 million, just in December, actually. And, you know, ads do have an effect. You know, overall, he's I mean, every day he has a new ad out, and his situation has improved somewhat in Iowa. But again, given how close we are, with the caucuses, 4 days away, and given the enormous lead that that Romney and Paul and Santorum have over this sort of second tier of candidates, I don't really see any of it having a difference in making a difference in the end.
So even though that particular ad has received all of this attention, you don't think that will affect him either way?
Not noticeably, I don't think. And I think that sometimes things that draw a lot of attention, to me, to journalists, to pundits and commentators, it's sometimes not entirely clear what effect that actually has on the ground. And Iowa is a very specific audience. It's one of the quirks and often people say problems with Iowa being first in the nation is that you have candidates sort of touting their super conservative, pro-ethanol credentials in that state. And so, the way that I perceive it in D.C. and other people perceive it might not necessarily be the way it's perceived on the ground.
Now, you mentioned Rick Perry's campaign spending a lot of money on ads. I believe in your reporting, you talked about $10 million ad blitzes between Mitt Romney and Rick Perry. Is that about right, or is that between the two campaigns?
It's between all of the campaigns, but it's essentially between those two campaigns simply because they're far outspending everyone else. I mean, Paul had over $1 million. Santorum at this point probably has. Actually, it's unclear how much Santorum has, but he's gotten a little bit of money in the last few days, a couple $100,000 probably. Gingrich probably got $1 million at this point. But yeah, an enormous amount of money, an enormous amount from super PACs. I think that as this election unfolds, the money is going to be a huge story. And I mean, if you break down the numbers in Iowa in December, half of it is coming from super PACs.
Would you say that money translates into votes directly? In other words, does it mean if you spend more money, you will essentially get more votes out of Iowa in particular?
I would say yes and no. I'll give you two examples. Santorum, until a couple days ago, didn't have really any money being spent in terms of ads. And in the last few days, he's proved that grassroots, just basically blanketing the state, campaigning constantly, shaking hands, traditional retail politics are working for him. Will they pull it off in the end? Probably not. But he's done exceedingly well for himself by doing that. On the other hand, you have Mitt Romney. He hasn't really been in the state very much, but he's spent millions and millions of dollars basically attacking Newt Gingrich, and those ads have been incredibly successful, at least in taking down his opponent. So it'll actually be really interesting to see what happens Tuesday. But yeah, I don't think there's like a ratio of dollars to votes, but it's a pretty powerful step. And when all you see on the airwaves is Newt has baggage, that makes a difference, it turns out.
And as we know, all of this money is being spent in particular with regards to Iowa. And what does that say about the significance of the Iowa caucus, that it's more relevant than ever?
For Mitt Romney, you mean?
Either for Mitt Romney or for any of the candidates.
No, I don't think so. It's a good question. I don't think it's more important than ever. I think actually a lot of talk has been, is Iowa more irrelevant than ever? And especially if Paul ends up winning, someone who everyone basically assumes could never beat Obama, will not be the nominee. If he wins in Iowa, it's yet another time when Iowa picks someone who doesn't go on to win the nomination. And so it's sort of another strike against Iowa as not being a bellwether, as not being able to choose the nominee. On the other hand, Romney winning Iowa is basically a statement that he can win in a conservative state, that he can win evangelical voters, which is always the concern for him. So for Mitt Romney, if he wins in Iowa, it makes it a big deal for his campaign, and it says a lot about how quickly the primary will be over.
All right. Before we let you go, Pam, anything else you're looking at in Iowa as the caucus is taking shape?
Yeah, you know, what everyone says about Iowa is that the Des Moines Register, the main paper there, their poll is sort of a definitive poll, and I believe their poll comes out tomorrow. And so everyone's polling in Iowa, but the poll to really watch, the poll where they're really on the ground doing a lot of work is the Des Moines Register poll, and so that coming out 3 days before the caucuses, that's something to look at.
All right. Well, Pema Levy, thank you so much for joining us. News writer at Talking Points Memo. Will you be in Iowa, incidentally?
I will not. I will be watching and writing from here in Washington, D.C.
It might be a little warmer there.
Much warmer. Much warmer.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.